I'm Shelley Blanton-Stroud, talking today to thriller author Marin Cooper, whose book, Behind the Lies, has published just this week. Welcome, Marin.
Thank you, Shelley, for having me. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Let me tell you just a little bit about Marin. She grew up in the Midwest and now lives in Minnesota. She serves as a volunteer for various nonprofits after a long career as a healthcare leader. She's been a lifelong reader. Once she discovered the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis, she began taking classes and slowly unearthed the aspiring writer beneath. Her debut novel, A Better Next, was published in 2019 by She Writes Press. Finding Grace in July of 2022, and Behind the Lies, published just this week, November 14th. Marin writes best on the North Shore of Lake Superior, where she retreats frequently to hike, needlepoint, and watch the deer devour her hostas. That's a very sad ending to that one. I will add that Marin and I share a publisher, She Writes Press, and that pub date of this week, November 14th. So I'm thrilled to have you here to talk about Behind the Lies, as well as your other two books in small bits. Marin, would you get us started by telling us a little bit about your writing story? I mean, you do mention that you had this long career in healthcare before pivoting to the second career. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, happy to. You know, my writing journey isn't that long. I retired fairly early and had always been a reader, but never really understood how writers did what they did. So that fascination led me, along with my free time, which was wonderful, to the Loft, where I started taking classes just to kind of sit and listen and be a voyeur. But as it happens, teachers usually don't let you be a voyeur. And you might know this as you've been a writing teacher. So after a little while, it became apparent that not only did they expect you to be writing things during class, just to, you know, spread your wings a little bit, but you might even have to own it and share it. So during that process, I thought, oh, I like this. This is kind of fun. And so I spent several, I don't even know how long, years, I'm sure, kind of learning about it, crafting, taking a lot of classes, doing a lot of online classes. And eventually the Loft required that those of us that had a work in progress make an appointment with what they have every year, which is like a pitch conference. They bring in agents. And so I could no longer hide. You know, you have to come up with an elevator speech, something that might get the attention of someone, et cetera. So that kind of gave me some confidence. I wasn't totally shut down. You know, I certainly didn't sell the book, et cetera. But, you know, it gave me enough to go forth. And so I did. I ventured forward.
That's great. And then, so what year was it when you first got your first book? And if you would just tell us about the three books that you've got, just sort of encapsulate them, and what kind of time frame was it for you?
Well, She Writes Press published A Better Next in May of 2019. And I'm going to go back to where I left off with the Loft and the pitch conference. You know, I am a mature writer. And so I frankly, I did not want to spend a lot of time chasing after an agent. I thought, okay, I'd have to come to an agent with what they might think of as a surefire seller. And maybe I'd have a few books in me, maybe not. And so I decided, after using Query Tracker and all that kind of thing, to go a different route. And one of my teachers at the Loft, who became a writing coach for me, Mary Carol Moore, has a blog, and I appreciate that blog. And she featured an author from She Writes Press, and that's the first time I knew anything about She Writes Press. So certainly it's a juried publisher. You have to, you know, reach a certain standard requirement of your work. But I thought, okay, this is exactly right for me. it would She Writes Press as a hybrid publisher handles the production side. You still are very much in control, but I didn't really want to handle all the business aspects. Hey, I've done business my entire career. I didn't want to do that. Plus, I did like the freedom that you had to own your own work. So I liked it. And so I went on to do the other two. So in 2019, I published She Writes Press. And I think, it was in May of 19, and you know how you get so excited about bringing a book into the world, and then guess what? In early 2020, things kind of shut down. So it was an interesting way to come out, have my debut. But I learned a lot. And during that time, as most of us were spending a little bit more time at home, I did write the second book. She Writes Press has given me that home. And so I didn't ever look beyond that for any of my books. So I will stop, though, and just say that A Better Next comes right out of my career path, because even though I have a BA in social work, I went to graduate school in hospital administration and had graduate degrees in management. And my career basically is in managing or leading hospitals or healthcare organizations. So sorry, I have to move my cat. Who likes to always sit on the keyboard. I don't quite know why. So A Better Next highlighted what I had experienced so much in my career, which is the chaos of consolidation for healthcare organizations, and the cost that actually, it's kind of a cost that not many people see, because it's chaos, and people have to have a winning and losing side and a merger, et cetera, et cetera. And so actually I fashioned it so that there's a married couple featured in this story, and one of them is on one side of the merger and the other is on the other. And so I was able to use the tension of that chaos to kind of portray some of what people don't know about mergers. Now that transcends healthcare. Mergers happen all the time. So that was my first foray in kind of, blending my business or corporate background with domestic notions. Mm-hmm. So that's the first book. And it takes place over, I want to say 1 to 3 years. And the second book, I was spending time at my Lake Superior place during the pandemic. And it's right on Lake Superior. And it's very dramatic. And I wanted to come up with something that would be a tip my hat to the lake kind of book. And so I chose a story that some call heartrending, hard to read, et cetera, but it portrays a mismatched couple who have a child that gets lost between them, basically. And the story plays out as to the narcissistic mother, the father who smothers, and then the child who has to find her way through that. And so that was my my song to Minnesota. And I've done a lot of work here in Minnesota to pitch it. And I've been very pleased with how that's been received. This third book, and that, by the way, is a family saga. It takes place over 20 years. So then we get to this third book, which I started writing while I was just finishing Finding Grace. And again, I'm using my background in corporate America and just as a citizen of the world and the country, and realizing that integrity is getting to be a little bit more rare than I care for. And I used the notion of this fake it till you make it culture of biotech, which I've watched and I happen to be fairly close to because of some of my board work, and use that as the frame for kind of a cautionary tale. so that, people perhaps, my hope is that people recognize that even if you have it all and you're an elite, there's still some pitfalls out there that perhaps your moral compass should be called upon. So did that answer your question?
It does. And it's interesting to me because when you talk to people about sort of core conflicts in different kinds of books, sometimes people call them genres. And a lot of time with crime-related novels, as this is, it's a thriller. It involves crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the core struggle is toward right and wrong, to resolve right and wrong, or justice, a struggle toward justice. And I love how complicated that struggle is in Behind the Lies. I love this book. And part of what I love about it is it's messy. And I don't mean the writing is messy. I mean the struggle is messy because there are all kinds of people with different experiences, different traumas, and different losses, different mistakes, different strengths. And while you're reading Behind the Lies, you're not quite aware of who's most righteous in their behavior and in their history.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to bring us right back to the world we're living in today.
Exactly. Thank you for that.
Can I ask you, because one of the things I enjoyed so much about Behind the Lies, it is definitely one of those novels you don't want to put down because it's propulsive and you wonder what's happening next. Where are we on this ride on this front versus that front? There are marital issues. There are extramarital issues. There's corporate intrigue. There's the world, the larger domain, and an attack, a cyber attack in the healthcare domain that they're working in. So there's all this stuff going on. I wanted to ask you, as a writer, how did you manage all of that complex plotting, the way you bring so many threads together? For the writers out there, how do you do it?
It's a really good question because I did not set out to write a thriller. In fact, when people say, "Oh, this has got a lot of suspense in it, et cetera," I know it does, but I start with a character, and then once I've got and of course, in this particular case, Will Franklin, who thought he had everything figured out in his life, and until he didn't, and so I wanted that kind of elite person to think about, I've got it all made. And then I just wanted to throw things at him. And so I wasn't exactly sure what was going to come next, but boy, was it fun throwing things at him. And so if you're asking me, how did I keep track of all those things I was throwing? Well, that's kind of the obsessive part of me. When you decide you need another twist and you've got more than one character, and I did try to bring other themes out. The loyal wife who some might think of as just kind of, well, she has it made, but she stands by her man even though she could have just left him in the dust, and she ends up being the brains. So I wanted to show that. I also wanted to show the complexity of blended families and estrangement, and how nobody is really perfect. If you scratch the surface, we are all human beings, and we're probably not proud of everything we've done in our life. So, there's also, as you probably know, there's a little bit of that whole thing of Elizabeth Holmes and her whole narrative about what she was able to do to basically get away with certain things for quite some time. And that, again, that fake it till you make it culture. So I did have to, I am, what do they say? Pantser or what is that phrase?
Plotter or pantser.
Right. I do a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I am somebody that was taught at the Loft by the people that I really appreciate to write scenes and keep track of it graphically. So I have that. And each of my scenes,
May
go
I
ahead.
interrupt to ask, how do you do it graphically? How do you keep track of it? Are you a post-it person, an outline person?
I used Excel.
Oh, okay.
And then I could never print it out because I'm not that technically savvy. So I would always have to go to it. And, so there's a window there or table piece there that has who's in the scene, what is your dramatic tension, and what are the remaining questions. Okay, so that's one of the ways I was able to see, oh, well, if he gets a call from this Robin Warren person, when is that going to come back in? Otherwise, I think it would have been really, really complicated. But throwing things at him was kind of up here. And then I had to kind of, make sure I didn't lose track of what it was. So, but that's kind of the fun of it, I would say. I loved writing this thriller. It was really fun because I've read thrillers all of my life.
Mhm.
And so it was really fun to do it and to try my hand at something so totally new. So
It's kind of interesting to watch you talking about that because, there's the fact that this is a very successful novel. It's people are going to love this. I can't wait for you all to read it. But there's the joy of the person who's done the writing, and it seems like you take pleasure both out of the concepts and topics you'd like to explore in the pages, but also in the craft of putting it together in a lively, there's an organic feeling. It doesn't feel stultified plotting or anything like that, but the reader kind of relaxes into it and gets the feeling that the author knows what she's doing, that there's a logic to things also, even though they feel very fluid and spontaneous.
mm-hmm.
So in a way, I can see how this really occupies all of your brain to make this come out as it does.
It does. And, I have to say, I have totally enjoyed my career as a writer, although it's always been just part of what I've been doing. I've got boards that I'm on, I've got family life, I've got a social life. And so it becomes that retreat that I really enjoy. And, I love writing. It beats going to meetings all the time, So I very much enjoy it.
I don't know if you're like this too. I think you are, that I experience being both an extrovert and an introvert, that I really love all these things in the world I get to do, but it is a great joy to come back to this little space and just let it be the story in me.
Exactly.
Another part of what you do is your volunteer work that you've alluded to. And I'm wondering, for so many people I talk to, their volunteerism relates to the kind of topics they're thinking about. Is that true for you? What kind of, you mentioned boards, and you don't have to get into specifics, but is there some overlap in the things that you're involved in as a volunteer and the topics you write about?
Absolutely. My kind of inside knowledge, and of course it's only my inside knowledge of biotech, is that frontier that is very tempting for any healthcare organization to get into. And so that I have that board member outlook on it, which is not the inside pieces of it,
Right.
but I have enough knowledge of it so that I know about the intrigues and the pitfalls and the dangers of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is in Behind the Lies, that cyber attack. Of course, we all see that, and we live with that. How many alerts do you get that your Social Security number was taken, or whatever? And so, when you also think about all of the issues we had during the pandemic with the supply chain. Remember, people couldn't get cargo ships through canals. Actually, that's even happening again now. And when you think about a big pharma or a biotech firm that's trying to help get things to places being crippled by a cyber attack, you can't help but think, oh my gosh, why don't they just get together and figure this out? So I wanted to kind of plant that seed in there because we really are all affected by some of that. So I would say living in this world now, but yes, clearly my volunteer work and my vantage point as a board member has clearly educated me and enriched my life. I've been very happy with it. It's a lot of work, because I'm a pretty fastidious and engaged board member in anything that I take on. So yes, biotech just fascinated me.
That's great. I also know that you've been involved not only with the Loft, which nurtured your writing, but with a publishing company that might have educated you about the world of publishing. And I don't know if we didn't talk about this in advance, but I don't know if you'd like to say anything about your sense as a woman who's fairly recently entered the world of publishing and has this sort of outside experience too. What do you think about the world of publishing right now, and what can nascent or emerging writers consider about all the options and all of the risks? I mean, we have so much going on with AI right now and just nothing but questions.
Well, it's a good question. And again, as a sister writer, you see it as well. When I first had any interest in this, I was kind of naive about what the publishing world was. And we've seen consolidation during the time that I've been writing it takes your breath away, and it still goes on every day. And so that whole thing, and that figured into, okay, well, how valuable is it going to be for me to spend 3 to 5 years looking for an agent who then will have to turn around to a shrinking number of publishers, when you could see that publishing itself was changing. Hybrids, I think, are pretty good for somebody like me. Self-publishing, I haven't flirted with, but I know many people have. I also think that, the whole threat of AI and what that's going to mean is, that's on the frontier. I'm going to watch that carefully. I don't like it at all. It's kind of like when manufacturing first was able to take over some of arts and crafts. If we basically, what happens to our artisans when they are not valued for that original work? And that makes me nervous. But there's a couple of bright things on the horizon in publishing, which I appreciate and support. And one of them is, my gosh, we've got such we've got such diversity now in publishing. And in my own case, the publishing company that I work with on a volunteer basis has fellowship program, so that they're bringing seldom heard voices into the business to learn it, not just authors, but to learn how to bring the written word or the audible word into the market, which I think is really, setting a stake in the future and helping us all out. Because if there's anything we know, it's that we don't know everything. And we need to have more voices in the public square. So publishing is a way to get them there. So that to me is very, very hopeful. I also think that self-publishing to a degree is related to that, because if the threshold to get in through the very small number of publishing houses now, even though there's more options, you still have to stake yourself to get there. Sometimes you don't know the right people. Sometimes it's going to take you longer than you have to do it. And so I think self-publishing, with many of the resources that are available now, is not a bad option for somebody getting in. So I like that. I like that as an option.
I like to think about it in terms of the musical world. Musicians have long, considered options about doing things all independently, in order to create the music that they wanted to create, the albums they wanted to create. And I think that ethic is maybe spreading through the publishing world. I was also, when you were describing the nonprofit publishing organization you work with, inviting people into the industry to show them how the whole thing works and to educate them about that. It does remind me of the writer's strike in Hollywood. And a particular part of the complaint there is that in the past, people in the writer's room, young writers, would, be in the writer's room, create the scripts, and then their contract would allow them to be on set to learn what happened with those words, what was lopped off, what was working, what wasn't working, and also how everything was done. And because they were there on set, all of a sudden that was teaching them how to be a leader in the making of a television show, how to become a showrunner. But in the recent way of things, those people have contracts that end when the script is written, so they have no idea of the full spectrum of things that have to happen afterwards. So it's almost like the industry not investing in its own future, and interesting.
Well, and it's almost like piecework, as opposed to seeing how the whole thing comes together. I would think that would be enriching to writers, and they will be smarter about what needs to happen, and the product would be richer. So
I also think for novelists and nonfiction writers too, a lot of the people I've talked to through Mystery Review Crew and also through our own publishers writer group, it seems to me that writers are better off when they're learning about their industry, not just about their craft. Of course, you have to be able to write as well as you can write something that's compelling, entertaining, provoking, but it helps to know how the whole thing floats.
Right. It gives you insight, and it's a profession, and it happens to be an artsy profession. But, the people that I know that are trying to make their livelihoods in the arts need to pay attention to how it all works. So we may not like the dirty details once in a while, but you need to understand your part in it.
I want to ask you about with characters in your most recent novel. As you know, we've had conversations before. I'm very interested in the theme of ambitious women. And it's because it's ambition in women has not always been seen as attractive. And I see ambition and wanting, longings in your female characters for a variety of things. And I didn't know if that just came out in this story because they're human and you are describing very human longings and so on, or if you have a conscious feeling about women and the attractiveness and the appropriateness of what they long for. I'm thinking of your last book also.
Wow, that is a pretty provocative subject. I would have to say it's kind of surprising to me, because I've been a feminist my entire life. I was one of only very few women usually in areas that I was in. So I had to learn how to navigate all of that. And I was always helpful to other women coming up. I was the opposite of that queen bee syndrome that you've probably heard of, where, oh, I'm the woman that made it, and I like being alone up here with all these guys. I always reached down and helped people to be at my level. So it surprises me. I would say that A Better Next is clearly about a woman who is ambitious professionally, but also has to raise a family and is in a marriage where those roles are defined to have much of the family's responsibility on her shoulders. And so that in and of itself, I put myself in her as the persona and was able to write that because of my own knowledge. And she comes out on the other end. she's a winner. She's probably better off than she ever expected she would be. So when I get to book number 2, most people would think of Charlie as my main protagonist. He's the most common narrator of the story, although there are 3 points of view in that story. And the female character, the adult female woman, is a narcissist. And she is really, some people call her loathsome. And I wanted to show that, women come in all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, et cetera, et cetera. And for Caroline, I was trying to show that we all know somebody that is a narcissist. We just may not talk about it that way, or somebody that has narcissistic tendencies. I also, in that book, wanted to show how the healthcare system doesn't do a good job with troubled youth who may be suicidal, because I know this from healthcare. That whole thing about, you can't be admitted to a hospital ward unless you're either a threat to yourself or others is old-fashioned. And I was pleased that we finally have a 911-like call number now, so that you can actually find help, even if you're in a rural area. So that was my cause for that one. So Caroline was just a nasty woman. She couldn't do it all, but she had also said she did not want to be a mother. So that whole reproductive thing, which was playing out in the world, was something that I wanted to take on. Not every woman should be a mother, especially if they know that themselves. So taking away her agency was part of the story. So then you come to Behind the Lies, and I guess I think let's look at the Will Franklin is the protagonist, and it's a cautionary tale for him and his like, which is successful male, ready to be the CEO, and guess what? He might have tripped. And how did he trip? What does that mean? And who tripped him? And there's several suspects there, not just the one. So the strong, there's 2 strong women. Well, there's several strong women in this story, all of whom, in fact, play a role in helping Will figure his life out. But let's just take the woman who, let's say, many will think tripped him up, the temptress. We'll call her the temptress. And she is a woman on the rise, and she's basically taken a shortcut. And she is going to take whoever she needs to for a ride to get there. It's just raw ambition. And I wanted to show that women have it. Women have raw ambition, and they can be dastardly. They can do it for the wrong reasons. And guess what? There are a lot of us out there. I mean, I'm not dastardly, but why not have these kinds of characters who are women who are not necessarily soft and cuddly? Even the role of Charlotte, the loyal and faithful wife, she's the one that kind of built the career that Will had. He was plucked from a lab by the wife who said, you've got more to offer. These guys are taking advantage of you, and you can do more good for more people in a different venue. So she was kind of whispering in his ear and helped him get there. So I just wanted to show the variety of roles that women play, because we know that about women. So it was fun to write.
Oh, it was fun to read for many reasons, and that's one of them. And what you're saying right now reminds me of one time when I was straight out of college. I had a job as a receptionist at a magazine, and there was a woman who was a salesperson for the magazine, and she was delightful. She was from the South. She was so elegant and charming, and this deep accent. She got so many people to buy ads for that magazine because of her deep charm. And her husband had been a judge, and he passed away. And she had been charming every single day I ever saw her. But when they started niggling on her benefits after he passed, she came into the office and she was on fire. And she said, who do they think got him through law school?
Yeah.
Who do they think managed every step of his career? Who do they think chaired committees that made it possible for him to be a judge? And at the time, I was so young and so inexperienced of the world. My eyes were as big as saucers. And I thought, gosh, maybe these women my grandmother's age have stories I'm unaware of. Stories of their own ambition and their own righteous feeling that they deserve a little something also.
Exactly.
Marin, it has been such a delight to talk to you. And I'm just so happy that you and I get to celebrate our book's publication week together.
Very
And
exciting.
It's a great book. Everyone, you're going to love it. You won't be able to put it down. You absolutely will not. So here's to a fantastic launch to you, Marin.
Well, and good luck to both of us. Thank you so much for having me, Shelley. I really appreciated it. Thank you.